Meet Harmon Killebrew, slugging star Minnesota Twins. He knows a big man can have a big perspiration problem, so he uses Break. Big Break, the deodorant for big protection. Look, most roll-ons, stroke for stroke, give this thin line protection, but Menon Break has a big roller top that rolls on this wide protection a big man wants. Try Menon's Big Break for big protection.
Back here at San Francisco's Cow Palace, the Republican National Convention. They've been filling time on the floor while the escort committee prepares to bring permanent chairman Thurston Morton to the platform, and while the convention awaits the arrival of one of its highlight speakers in the scheduled 4 days of events here, the latest Republican president of the United States, Dwight David Eisenhower. Bob Pierpoint is in front of the Mark Hopkins Hotel and has something for us on the plans of Senator Goldwater. Bob?
Walter, Senator Goldwater has disappeared. Well, maybe not really, but at least he has been gone for several hours from his hotel suite here at the Mark Hopkins, and we reporters have lost him completely. Presumably, some of his aides know where he is, and one of them said that he'd gone out to get some well-deserved recreation, so maybe he's playing golf. Anyway, the senator does not seem to be playing much politics today, which may be significant. Perhaps he doesn't think he needs to, with the situation well in hands of his aides out at the Cow Palace. In fact, today has been a rather relaxed one for Senator Goldwater. He started out early with a visit to the Oregon delegation. That's the state he lost in the primary to Governor Rockefeller, and there he got a surprisingly warm reception. One lady delegate tried to entice the senator into an argument over right-to-work laws, but the senator said that that was a matter for the individual states to decide, and he refused to be enticed further. Senator Goldwater today seemed to be looking beyond the nomination, which he thinks he will get tomorrow night, to the campaign period. He talked today about the new outline of the Republican National Committee, which he wants to see filled with younger, more dynamic conservatives. And he sounded like he was already campaigning against Lyndon Johnson. At one point today, he said the Johnson administration has been taken over by the most dangerous of all extremists, the socialists. And almost any Republican could cheer a statement like that, and many of them did. That's the Goldwater story for today so far, Walter.
Bob, the senator doesn't have any doubt that he and his philosophy are going to be in control of that national committee in which he wants to see young conservatives. The makeup of the national committee is almost certainly to follow the makeup of the various committees of this convention, which are, after all, appointed by the same delegations which will elect the national committeemen here. And they showed in every one of these test votes on the matters of credentials, rules, and platform that the split is just about, you can almost say safely, 65 to 35. The senator doesn't have any doubt about that, does he?
None whatsoever. He feels that he's already got some of the people picked for the National Committee, and there'll be very many of the same people that you're seeing now in these important key positions around that Cow Palace.
What do you hear about the chairmanship of that committee?
Well, I think at the moment the senator, while he claims not to have made up his mind, highly favors Cliff White. Cliff, as you know, is a very dynamic New York Republican, a longtime leader of the Young Republicans, and he kind of organized this whole grassroots conservative movement for Goldwater starting a couple of years ago. He has brought the senator's delegate strength to its present peak, and the senator thinks very highly of him.
The matter of the national chairmanship is a precise parallel to the vice presidency. The national chairman can be picked by the presidential candidate. The politics being so utterly simple. The same people who must vote on the candidate on the floor of the convention are the same people who vote for the national committeeman, and the national committee is the people who vote for the chairman. So the candidate has control over the situation, would you say, Bob?
Absolutely, and in this case, Senator Goldwater has shown that he and his people have complete control over not only what's going on at the Cow Palace, but over a large percentage of the delegates here and in the grassroots around the country. They really have done a job in organizing the conservatives among the Republicans, and this steamroller has been moving, and it's flattened out a lot of the moderates and liberals in the party.
Thank you, Bob. Fairpoint, be coming back to you. When you've got something else, let us know. On the floor of the convention, Martin Agronsky is keeping up with details of the coming platform fight. Martin, what's the latest?
Well, the latest is that they're still disorganized on the Scranton side. They're not at all certain as yet whether they will go beyond a roll call vote on the extremism proposal to the platform. You know, the other two are presidential control of nuclear weapons and civil rights. I think that the disorganization here, the inability to arrive at a decision, is a pretty good demonstration of what has happened to the whole movement against Mr. Goldwater. The Scranton people are unable to decide even on a tactic on how to amend the platform, even on a tactic on how to bring the floor fight on a platform issue, whether it should be on civil rights, whether it be on nuclear weapons, or whether it should be on extremism. This kind of diffusion of leadership, this kind of indecision, is a true reflection of the state, the political state of the anti-Goldwater forces here. There is no one person who has taken over. There's no one person who seems at all certain about what to do. Many of the Scranton people are really furious with Senator Scott for having accepted from Mr. Miller, the Republican National Committee chairman, the rule that only one roll call vote will be held, and that on extremism. They are in revolt about that, but the revolt again is a useless one because it seems very unlikely that they'll be able to get the requisite number of delegations, that is a majority of 6 delegations, to demand the roll call vote on the other 2 issues. And I think that really this whole fight is going to die with almost a whimper rather than a bang. It's just going to fall away, slide away out here on the floor without any really spirited effort to contest the Goldwater forces on any issue, the platform or on anything else. Speaking to George Lodge, speaking to Paul Grindle, one of the Scranton strategists, speaking to Representative Frelinghuysen, I find only really, dismay, anger, one faction with the other, and the whole thing seems to be falling apart. Unless they can pull it together, Walter, I don't see how they can be effective down here.
Actually, if any of these dissidents in the Scranton camp opposed to the single roll call get up and attempt to get recognition to push for a roll call on the others, since Senator Scott has made an agreement with Chairman Miller, they probably won't be recognized from the chair. They can shout and scream, but they won't get recognition.
That's exactly what will happen. He'll just gavel them into submission or ignore them, which is a tradition in both Democratic and Republican conventions.
Might be the reason that Craig Truax has got that bullhorn down there on the floor. At least he can cause a lot of noise, or some like him, if they want to, but they still don't necessarily have to be recognized.
No, they don't, Walter. I think if you ever want to see a perfect example of turning a deaf ear, you're going to see Mr. Morton turn a deaf ear when that bullhorn sounds. They have no intention whatsoever of permitting the 3 roll call votes, and they simply haven't got the strength to do anything about it. One last desperate effort on the part of the Scranton people who want the 3 roll call votes was to try to get the letters from chairmen of 8 delegations to present physically on the platform. But the last I heard about that was they couldn't get the chairman of 8 delegations together to give them that particular permission. So it's difficult to see what particular technique or tactic they can undertake practically to get this thing started.
Right, Martin. We can now see Martin entering the Scow Palace, former President Eisenhower with his escorting committee, and over on the left of your screen occasionally you get a quick view of Colonel John Eisenhower, his son. The escorting committee, appointed by the chair to escort General and Mrs. Eisenhower into the convention hall and to the podium, include Thomas McCabe of Pennsylvania, an industrialist who worked hard to get Governor Scranton into this race, William Brock of Tennessee, G. Harold Alexander of Florida, Mrs. Marion T. Fuller of Maine, Mrs. Donald G. Nutter, the widow of the former governor of Wyoming, and Mrs. Julia Maddox of Oklahoma. The general is being ushered into the VIP trailer here, the trailer for very important personages, of whom there is certainly none more important at this convention than the former President of the United States. Now, at the podium of this convention hall is Senator Roman Riska of the state of Nebraska, who is beginning the series of introductions before bringing Senator Thurston Morton to the stand, the permanent chairman of the convention, which is the order of business immediately preceding the presentation of former President Eisenhower. Dan Rather is on the floor of the convention at the Texas delegation. Dan?
Yes, Walter. We're standing with the Texas delegation and Peter O'Donnell, Jr. of Dallas, who you may recall as one of the very early backers of Senator Barry Goldwater and the chairman of the Draft Goldwater Committee, and Albert Fay, who's a national committeeman from Texas and another of the early backers of Senator Barry Goldwater. Gentlemen, do you think any one or all three of these platform fights that the Scranton forces and the moderate forces want to be successful with here today will be successful? How about it, Mr. O'Donnell?
Well, we don't know the language of their proposal, and with the arguments that will be presented in support. I, for one, have a good deal of confidence in the members of the platform committee and the documents that they adopted, and I think this convention does too.
Do you consider the fight on the so-called extremism issue a fair one? Is that a fair issue to bring to the convention floor, Mr. Fay?
Well, you can bring anything to the convention floor that you want to, but to me, just to single out any one organization and just try to name it as an extreme organization when there are probably many others in the country doesn't seem quite cricket to me. If they want to just say extremists or something like that, it would be better, in my opinion, than to try to single out some organization by name.
I would like to comment on that. That is precisely what General Eisenhower said yesterday. He said, "I do not believe in condemning any group by a specific name."
There was a report that former Army General Edwin Walker is in the hall, and there was another report that he had tried to get tickets from the Texas delegation. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I just checked on that since I had been requested to do so. He is not a member of the Texas delegation, nor does he have any Texas badge or ticket.
How about Oilman H.L. Hunt of Dallas? There also was a report that he was with the delegation.
No, that's not correct. I understand he has a hotel room here in the city, but he's not a member of the Texas delegation, nor does he have a ticket.
How about this report that he had a whole floor at the Jack Tower Hotel and was involved with your communications?
Well, that seems to be somewhat exaggerated. I understand someone checked with the Jack Tower management, and he had one room.
Thank you very much, Peter O'Donnell and Albert Fay of Texas. Walter, that's it from the Texas delegation.
Dan, on the matter of General Walker, did he come to the convention hall tonight, Cow Palace, and try to get in, do you know? Or is he in the stand somewhere?
Walter, we've made a thorough round of both the galleries and the floor, and we have not seen General Walker. The report apparently originated in the Oklahoma delegation. We checked back with the Oklahoma delegates, and among those seated could find no one who even thought he had seen General Walker. It's just one of those rumors that occasionally sweep back and forth across the floor. He is known to be in San Francisco.
Dan, you've covered Texas politics quite diligently over the years, having been stationed down there for a while. Does General Walker take an active role in Republican Party politics in Texas?
No, Walter, he's never taken an active role in any party politics, actually. You may recall when he ran for governor, he ran as a Democrat. It was generally thought that he might run as a Republican before he made that decision, but he ran as a Democrat, and the Texas delegation here at the Republican convention has been saying all morning that if Walker's here, they don't even want to see him because he is a Democrat. But he's never taken an active role in party politics.
Well, that's what I wanted to straighten out with that question, because that was my memory of it, and those are the facts. And the fact that he's rumored to be here or taking any kind of a role certainly seems to be a wide stretch of the facts.
Well, if he's here at all, it would have to be, it would seem, simply as an observer.
Right, thank you, Dan. And now, the permanent chairman of this convention, Senator Thurston Morton of Kentucky, has just been introduced and is making his way to the podium.
Senator Oscar, delegates and guests of this convention, as all of you know, I'm a peace-loving man. I live by that verse from 26 Proverbs, which I read. He that passeth by and vexeth himself with strife, belonging not to him, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. In spite of the fact that I'm a peace-loving man, nevertheless, most Americans have come to expect, at least during a national political convention, one speaker to lay it on the line. I mean, the dirty linen. Fasten your seat belts. I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to talk republicanism right now, and if anybody doesn't like it, they can leave right now. And I'll tell you something. Today, the Democrats have one of the biggest bundles of this type of linen that's come out of Washington in this century. I don't know whether to begin with Billy Sol Estes or with Cuba. I think I'll start with Bobby Baker. You know, the history books say that George Washington could broad jump 23 feet. That's nothing. We got Democrats in Washington who get sidestepped more than that today. I think they proved it in the Bobby Baker investigation, if you can call it an investigation. That was something. When the reporters asked President Johnson if he wasn't bothered by Bobby Baker, his 11-year protege, making a couple of million on a small Senate salary, and saying he had 10 Democratic votes in his pocket in the Senate alone, and the president said, "Bobby who?" You know what happened after that. They've tried to whitewash this thing, and with their huge majorities, they hope to make that whitewash stick, but I predict to you that they won't. Then there was a case of Billy Sol Estes. He'd go over to the Department of Agriculture, and he'd yell at the Democrats over there to jump. And on their way up, they'd ask him, "How high?" And the shakedowns in civil service, the shakedowns for contributions from defense contractors, when we asked the Attorney General to look into this as a violation of the Hatch Act, all we got was, quote, "We don't have any positive evidence," unquote. Now, my friends, if we only had corruption these past 4 years, we might excuse it on the grounds of the capacity of those who were appointed to high place. But it's more than that. It's not just corruption that's resulted from the downhill plunge in political morality these last 4 years. This lack of morality, this willingness to look the other way, this eagerness to pretend that not facts are not facts, has led us into trouble all over the world. I, for one, am getting sick and tired of Americans being kicked in the teeth in Southeast Asia and Africa and South America and Europe, while a fumbling, bumbling bunch of party hacks in the White House try to imitate statesmen. Everywhere on this green earth that we look today, the peace so carefully wrought under the Republican Eisenhower administration is falling apart. The crises springing up in a dozen different areas of the world are facts of life. They worry every American, Republican and Democrat as well, and ignoring them won't make them go away. All the press agents of the world can't change the fact that our allies under President Eisenhower thumb their noses at us now under President Johnson. In Guinea, in Ghana, in Zanzibar, in the Congo, we've sat on our hands and played a game of let's pretend. When Dwight Eisenhower was President of the United States, the White House told the communists America's position in no uncertain terms. If need be, our Republican asked Congress for a joint resolution of support. The world knew that Americans were united, and that we were united on a concrete, specific, unmistakably clear policy, and it was successful. It was successful because our friends and our enemies knew where the United States stood and were not bogged down by a contradictory, confusing deluge of press releases and so-called inside stories. That's what America wants today. A clear-cut statement of what we're for and what we're against. And under the Democrats, we don't have it. Now, when I talk about the downhill plunge America has been taking these past 4 years, I don't mean just overseas. I mean here in the United States, where government press agents have tried to convince Americans that the Democrats are on an economy drive. Now, this might be funny if it didn't involve the dollars that hard-working Americans have to hand over to Washington every year. The plain fact of the matter is that President Johnson's talk of economy is a sham. Right now, today, this minute, President Johnson is spending nearly $2 million a day more than President Kennedy spent. Right now, today, this minute, President Johnson is spending $2 million an hour more than President Eisenhower spent in his last year in office. I repeat, $2 million an hour. Think of it, $2 million an hour more than President Eisenhower spent. Now, instead of reducing the national debt, President Johnson is getting an $8 billion increase in the national debt. He's raising it from $315 to $325 billion. Now, my friends, if this is a sample of economy, heaven help us the day that President Johnson decides to spend a little piece of money. They told us that he was cutting down on federal employees. We got our hopes up over that one until we found out that it was a reduction of 5/10,000ths of 1%. Then we found out when we got the budget message that they're putting on additional employees under contract, and the Air Force alone is hiring more new people than all the rest of government is reducing or losing under this so-called cutback. This question of not being fair, square, not leveling with the American people is, I think, one that should concern us all. I picked up the paper the other day and I saw the Chinese communists said that we had been engaged in certain aviation missions. Washington denied it. The press corps in Washington, after properly getting good and mad, finally pinned down the State Department and the Defense Department. Yes, we had been flying these missions. Why kid the American people? The American people can take it if we give them the straight facts. Let them have it. They'll take it. Now, I don't know what's happening in this country. I'm disturbed, and I know you're disturbed. Not much that has happened. I'm disturbed about the fact that in many of our public schools, they no longer have the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I'm disturbed about the fact that 30 school children the other day refused to pledge allegiance to the flag because, quote, their rights were involved, unquote. Now take a look at that flag. 1 million American men and women have died fighting for it. in a handful of wars and countless individual acts of courage. Over 50,000 in Korea alone, almost 500,000 in World War II, over 100,000 in World War I, and almost 500,000 in our war between the states. We've carried that flag, we've clutched that flag when we knew we would have to die for it. Is today's citizen less of a man? Is today's citizen so conditioned to government press agents and television editorials and speeches by striped pants bureaucrats that he's willing to ignore the challenge of today and our history of heroism? Look at that flag. We're spending more for government this year than we are for food, for clothing, for medical care, and for religious activities. Is that what that flag stands for? Well, if we're going to change things, we've got to work like we've never worked before. We've got to spread the gospel of individual liberty as it hasn't been done since 1776. We've got to get the facts in front of every American. We've got to put the truth in his daily diet. We can do it. I know we can, because we're the ones that believe in America. We are the ones who believe in Americans, who believe in the potential of the people of this country. But we've got to start now, and we've got to fight. We've got to start now, here tonight, and keep going full steam until the Republican Party takes over the direction and the management of this country. This we can do. This we can and will do through victory in November. Now let's get on with this show. We're going to hear from one of the greatest Americans of all time tonight. We're going to adopt a platform, and we're going to nominate a winning ticket here in the next couple of days. Let's get the show on the road.
Fighting speech from the permanent chairman of this Republican convention, who has just taken the gavel, Senator Thurston Morton. He'll be introducing former President Eisenhower in a moment. Campaign 64, our CBS News coverage of the 1964 Republican convention will continue in a moment.
Aching joints, arthritis, minor pain, no rubbing can make salves or liniments penetrate to reach that pain deep inside joints and muscles. Get liquid heat. Just brush on heat. Heat soaks deep into skin fast, and when heat soaks in, pain flows out. Heat replaces pain from deep inside joints and muscles with hours of soothing relief. For relief of aching joints, arthritis, minor pain, get heat. When heat soaks in, pain flows out.
For every bug you see, there are more bugs hiding. But now comes Black Flag House and Garden Spray for both indoors and outdoors. Not only kills bugs where you see them, Black Flag's invisible fumigating action attacks bugs you don't see, kills bugs where they hide. Outside, too, Black Flag House and Garden kills bugs where you see them, kills bugs where they hide.
Smells good. Saves up to 29 cents.
Black Flag House and Garden Spray.
Speaking now to the convention is Donald E. Buzz Lukens, the 32-year-old chairman of the Young Republican National Federation, who was elected to that job on a Goldwater for President and conservative platform. He will present the gavel to Thurston Morton as permanent chairman of the convention. And this is John Eisenhower, the president's son, in the VIP trailer where his father is waiting to come before the convention, speaking to newsmen and guards and the convention officials outside of the trailer. After Buzz Lukens has presented the gavel to Thurston Morton, Thurston Morton then will introduce the Minority Leader of the House of Representatives, Charles E. Halleck, who in turn will introduce President Eisenhower. Charles Halleck became the House Republican leader during the Eisenhower administration with Mr. Eisenhower's tacit approval. So it seems particularly fitting that he should be chosen to introduce General Eisenhower tonight. Now for the rest of the Charles Halleck story, here is Roger Mudd.
In the congressional elections of '34, Republicans took their worst shellacking ever. That was the improbable year in which Charles Halleck of Indiana first won his seat in Congress. Freshman Halleck volunteered for everything, soon was known as Available Charlie. What the country needed, said Halleck, was a new Coolidge. But in '40, he made the nominating speech for a most unlikely Coolidge, Wendell Willkie. He explains, "I thought Willkie could win." 8 years later, Halleck thought Tom Dewey could win, especially if Halleck were nominated for second place. Halleck wasn't, and Dewey didn't. But Halleck had already won the party's second place in the House of Representatives. It took him a dozen years to edge aging Joe Martin out for number 1. As floor leader in '59 and '60, Halleck delivered the vote for Ike. Got a thank you note saying, "You are a political genius." Halleck won few thank you notes from President Kennedy. He molded a conservative coalition with Southern Democrats which built many a fence around the new frontier. But this year, Halleck broke that coalition wide open by leading House Republicans to a resounding yay for the Civil Rights Bill. Along with the party's Senate leader, Everett Dirksen, Halleck achieved a kind of show business fame with a weekly TV statement of party policy. Quickly called the Ev and Charlie Show, it's had less than rave reviews from younger Republicans. Many regard the dour 60-ish image of their party leaders as politically uncommercial. Nevertheless, Halleck remains at 63, one of the scrappiest sluggers in the Republican ring. He calls himself a gut fighter. No one is surprised at this convention to find him in the thick of the action.
And we'll be seeing him at the platform in just a moment. The huge gavel has just been handed to Chairman Morton. Let's go back to the floor. That is Buzz Lukens, the head of the Young Republican National Federation, with him.
All right, I hope this is reinforced here. There happen to be some traffic problems getting out here, but I think we're underway. I would like to ask the committee, which has already been appointed, to escort former President Eisenhower and Mrs. Eisenhower to the platform, to proceed to the rear of the platform for their pleasant mission. Now, would Congressman Charles Halleck please come to the platform at this point? Congressman Halleck of Indiana, leader of the Republican Party in the United States Congress, would he please come to the platform? While he's making his way to the platform, could we have one number?
Eric, as far as we know, this is the first part of the scheduling that has gone amiss with a missing Charles Halleck. Thurston Morton has to call for some entertainment while they find him and get him to the platform.
He's not out in the trailer with the general.
Well, I wonder if maybe he is out there. We didn't see him go into the trailer, but that doesn't mean that he's not
a man
there.
that rarely misses a cue in politics. I would be surprised if he missed this one.
Remember the dramatic occasion when they decided in Washington that wonderful old Joe Martin had run his course as the minority leader, the leader of the Republican Party, and Charles Halleck stepped in.
Halleck wanted very much to be the vice presidential nominee in '48. Thought he had it, but he didn't. And he's been a little frustrated, perhaps in some ways. He's a good, scrappy fighter, as someone was just saying. The Morton speech was also a scrappy, real campaign speech, perhaps more speed than altitude. However, remarked Mr. Dooley long ago that politics ain't beanbags. And this is always required in an American convention.
We're getting a little more of it tonight. The pace of this thing is stepping up a bit tonight. The campaign oratory has begun. There's Halleck. Did we just
Halleck just went by the trailer. He was out there.
We saw him in one of our control monitors here. We didn't see him on the screen. He just left the trailer. Martin Agronsky's on the floor of the hall. Eric may have something new on the platform fight and how it's developing. Martin?
Walter, we've been trying to determine as well as we can how the vote on the platform will go, and particularly the vote on extremism. And our floor reporter has been checking with delegations, and our estimate is that something like 700 votes.
Martin,
yes,
Martin,
Walter.
we'll come back for more of that. Charles Halleck is just getting to the podium. Will be introduced by Thurston Morton. We want to hear this.
Right out.
Sergeants at arms, the assistant sergeants at arms to do so. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to hear what will perhaps be the most important address of this convention or any other. And I insist that these aisles be cleared and that this body execute and show some degree of decorum.
Now, that's
May
better.
I
It's going
say
to sound like a
compliment
convention.
the delegates for the attention that they are paying and for the fact that they are in their seats. But let's get these aisles cleared, and cleared now. We're not going to proceed until they are cleared. All right, let's get moving out of this aisle here.
Martin, if it takes them a second to clear the aisles, maybe you can finish that statement.
Yeah, well, they're trying to achieve decorum. Walter, our estimate is that something like 31 states will go against this extremism resolution and only 16 for it. That's 48 of the states that are represented here, 48 of our 50. And probably something like between 700 and 800 votes will go against the extremism resolution, the rest for it. Now, what is most interesting about the check that we did was that we also asked about where would these states stand on a civil rights vote. That is an effort to introduce a civil rights addendum to the platform. And the answer to that was that it would be very, very tight, and in fact, the Scranton people might have won on that issue. So it would appear that in choosing the extremism issue, they seem to have blundered again in that particular instance. Now, what I can't understand is that if we can do this check, and if we're right, of course, and we hope we are, but if our check is right, why could not they have done the check and decided on civil rights? Again, if it does prove to work out this way, Walter, I think we have an instance here of not too good generalship, not too good political operations on the part of the Scranton people. Interesting to see if it goes this way. This is really the only opportunity that the Scranton people have to get a fight going here on the floor, to do anything to reverse the Goldwater trend. If they miss here, I don't know where they can succeed.
Okay, Martin, just introduce Charles Halleck, and back to the...
Chairman, delegates to the convention, ladies and gentlemen, 8 years ago it was my privilege to place in nomination for re-election to the presidency of the United States the most widely beloved man of our age, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Addressing my remarks to him on this very spot, I said, "You have proved yourself to be the right man for our times." Dwight Eisenhower went on to win the greatest victory of any presidential candidate in the history of the Republican Party because the American people felt the same way about him as I did. Why was Dwight Eisenhower right for the times? As General of the Armies, he had led the mightiest military force of all history to victory over a tyranny which threatened to enslave the world. As President of the United States, he had brought peace to a nation suffering the agony of a frustrating war in Korea, a war we had not been allowed to win and didn't dare to lose. He had forged a foreign policy that also kept us out of any new wars. And my friends, as we look back, wasn't it wonderful to go through 8 wonderful years without a single American boy being killed in armed conflict? President Eisenhower had moved with a sure hand to build for America the most powerful military defenses in the world. The people of this country now know that throughout his years, he wisely provided for the continuing strength of that posture all the 1960 Democrat campaign oratory to the contrary notwithstanding. He had made clear to the Kremlin rulers in terms they could understand that he was a strong leader of free men, determined to stay free, and that he meant what he said. He leveled with those who had designs on our liberty so there could be no misunderstanding. And because he was forthright and resolute, the whole free world breathed easier for those 8 most welcome years. And here at home, President Eisenhower came to the presidency at a time when war-borne controls and regimentation were strangling our economy. Thanks to this great Republican president and to a Republican Congress, those shackles were broken and the nation's productive capacity surged forward to an unprecedented period of peacetime expansion. Beyond that, President Eisenhower had brought new dignity to the highest office that we could bestow on any man. By his statesmanship, by his stature at home and abroad, President Eisenhower had made all of us prouder to be Americans. He had led us to a peace and a new era of solid progress and prosperity in a world without war. Small wonder the free men and women of America swept him back into office in one of the greatest displays of confidence and trust ever accorded any chief executive. The American people did this without President Eisenhower ever asking Congress to vote him campaign funds in the guise of meeting human needs. As one of the elected officers of the House of Representatives, it was my privilege to meet regularly with President Eisenhower during the 8 years of his presidency. As the Eisenhower programs unfolded, the nation continued to move forward. Under his leadership, Republicans in the House of Representatives, whether we were in the majority or the minority, displayed continuing unity without parallel, I say, in American politics. In this fight, no one has given those of us on the firing line in the Congress more encouragement than this man from Gettysburg. Our Republican esprit de corps in the House of Representatives stems in large measure from this grand soldier statesman's devotion to duty, his courage, his integrity, and his selfless dedication to the service of his fellow man. My fellow Republicans, I say, let's stay with these ideals. Close ranks for these ideals. This I want clearly understood. If Republicans in the House of Representatives north, south, east, and west, urban and rural, can demonstrate the solidarity, the unity that the 178 of us in the House of Representatives have been demonstrating, then I say Republicans all up and down the land ought to be able to do the same thing. So do this, and victory will rest on our banners. Keep the faith in our cause and in our country, as the distinguished American I now present to you has kept that faith. I now present to this great convention General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States.
General Eisenhower, Mrs. Eisenhower, son John Eisenhower leaving the trailer behind the Cow Palace to enter the hall, while the biggest demonstration of this convention so far welcomes him to the scene where he was renominated for the presidency in 1956.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Congressman Halleck, and my fellow citizens, I am here this evening, first of all, as a citizen of the United States, with primary allegiance to my country. But second, I am here with great pride because I am a Republican. I am dedicated to the purposes of this party. I am jealous of its good name. I am grateful to those who, among us, represent us all by their discharge of political responsibility. Because of these feelings, I hold this simple conviction. For the good of America, Republicans must be restored in great numbers to controlling positions at all governmental levels, including the highest, the presidency of the United States. Now, my friends, my purpose this evening is very personal. I shall try to give you the reasons for my deep dedication to republicanism as I understand republicanism. To do so, I shall cite a few incidents in our party's history and then take a glance at its opportunities for service today and in the future. This means that only for a moment I must ask you to bank the fires of fiercely competitive intra-party politics and contemplate with me the whole of this great party, the reasons for its birth, its record of valuable service, and the bright promise of its future. Now, please understand that just as soon as I finish, you are at liberty to resume the fray. Our party, let us never forget, was born out of protest against the supreme indignity to mankind, slavery, the story of which is found on the darkest pages of America's history, both North and South. It persisted as a social cancer even in this land of liberty until Abraham Lincoln eliminated it a century ago, supported by our party, which he led. This Republican Party then was conceived to battle injustice. It was born committed against degradation of people. So it is more than mere coincidence that we Republicans have as an article of political faith, faith in the individual. Nor is it coincidence that our party, so born, has never ceased to champion the rights and privileges of every citizen, regardless of race or station. It is not our claim, therefore, and may it never be, that we or any others have the right or duty to control the individual in the legitimate conduct of his daily life. Rather, we have ever sought to create an atmosphere of liberty and to sustain its substance. Consistent with this effort, we have maintained that in all those things that the citizen can better do for himself than can his government, the government ought not to interfere. From the time that Lincoln signed the Land Grant Act in 1862 to recent weeks, when Republicans in Congress, to their great credit, voted far more overwhelmingly than did our opponents to pass the Civil Rights Bill. During that period of more than a century, our party's programs have reflected concern for the individual, whoever he may be, wherever he may be, whatever he may be. Though often cast in the role of the opposition in recent years and compelled to battle a never-ending stream of unwise proposals, our party's stature has been earned through its dedication to positive purposes. For half a century after Lincoln's inauguration, our country lived under almost continuous Republican leadership, and it prospered mightily. Transcontinental systems of railways, roads and waterways, great manufacturing plants, schools, and bustling communities. They sprang forth as if by magic, all the product of a free people, vigorously and freely competing among themselves. Protected by laws against an unwarranted concentration of industrial or financial power, our citizenry proudly and happily pushed forward to new levels of achievement and prosperity. The next half-century, beginning shortly before World War I and marked later by the Great Depression, World War II, and the Korean conflict, ushered in a season of troubles. In the last 32 years, our political opponents have controlled the executive branch of the federal government for 24 and the Congress for 28. During this period, our money was recklessly devalued with great hardship upon much of our citizenry. The extension of federal influence was made permanent policy, even though its miserable lack of success in the economic arena persisted until the violent demands of war obscured the unhappiness of the failure. The centralizing process even went so far as to include an attempt by summary executive power to seize the steel industry. Now, some of these acts and laws were necessary, others not. But the sinister trend toward paternalism, which now again grows apace, was interrupted only by the 8-year determination of a Republican administration in the 1950s. That administration stood for integrity in government. It stood for fiscal responsibility, including disciplined management of public spending. It supported our private competitive enterprise system. It insisted that all public responsibilities be carried out wherever possible by local and state governments, by the federal government only when necessary. Our party stood for a sound foreign policy within which every critical development would be carefully judged and consistent action forthrightly taken. Recognizing that in this troubled and threatened world, security forces unmatched in efficiency and strength are necessary to sustain the peace, our party provided them. At the same time, it insisted upon avoiding the peaks and valleys in military activity that spell always waste and efficiency and extravagance. It was an administration which set its face directly for the people and their well-being, and directly against any increase in the concentration of power in Washington. We rejected all those steps which, over the long run, would make the citizen a ward of government. Instead, our Republican position was that the ambitions, incentives, and aspirations of free men are the mainspring of all progress. In these years, the party achieved, I submit, a record of strength for America abroad, a record of responsible, common-sense government at home. But the raucous cry of demagoguery has never ceased. Beginning in the 1930s and continuing to today, our countrymen have been subjected to a sustained barrage of political misrepresentation. Let me offer just a few examples. First, for 30 years, opposing political leaders have claimed that ours is the party of privilege. This is utter nonsense. Our concern for every citizen, whatever his status, shines forth from every tenet of Republican doctrine. The truth is, it is Republicans who think of and really try to serve the littlest of all citizens, the children of America, and even the grandchildren of today's unborn babe. by our insistence upon paying now for what we demand from government today, instead of charging our bills to posterity, we are seeing to it that those who follow us will not one day be working out their lives paying off gigantic debts run up through our own selfishness and profligacy. This concern for the future is in keeping with Republican conviction and American tradition. America is here not just for a day, a year, a century. It is here. In the Constitution we read, as the purpose of our inspired founders, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. And any political party that counsels us today to ignore the needs of tomorrow so that on deficit spending we may live today in comfort and ease is false to America's true meaning and to our destiny. So our policy of sound conduct of fiscal affairs is simply proof of our concern for all Americans, both now and in the future. Again, when Republicans stand for a sound dollar, meaning one that will buy tomorrow roughly as much as today, demagogues cry out that we care less for people than for money. Yet who can be hurt more by spiraling costs than the wage earner? The worker will one day have to live on his hard-earned pension, insurance policy, or savings account. He has no defense against the silent but most insatiable thief of all, inflation. It is for the sake of that worker, white collar, blue collar, no collar, that we fight to prevent erosion of our currency. Then, when public opinion polls indicate that Democrats can keep America at peace more surely than can the Republicans, certainly nothing but public misinformation or blind partisanship is reflected. The causes of America's wars of this century cannot fairly be laid to any political party or individual. But when we remember that all three of them, World War I, World War II, and the Korean War, were started during Democratic administrations, and that none in this started during Republican administrations, it is hard to believe that an informed and impartial public should conclude Republicans are less able to keep the peace than the Democrats. But the most persistent charge against us is that Republicans have ignored the great human problems that have been occasioned, or at least intensified, by modern mass production. While Republicans have insisted that these problems should not become the football of Washington bureaucrats, we have approached them sympathetically and at the grassroots, so that the solutions for emerging difficulties would be tailored best to the conditions pertaining to specific needs. Thus, such participation of the federal government as is necessary would reflect the wisdom and desires of those closest to the problem. It was in this framework of conviction and action that a Republican administration in the 1950s extended Social Security coverage to 10 million more people. It is why Republicans increased Social Security payments to meet the increased costs caused by earlier inflation. For the same reason, we initiated programs to meet the conditions in chronically depressed areas, programs designed to help people help themselves. Also, it was why we took steps by law to ensure the ability of able young men and women to obtain university training, today so badly needed by the nation. Now, in all such work, the Republican aim has been not merely to meet the immediate and inescapable material needs of the citizen, but so to act as to do no damage to his pride, dignity, self-reliance, and self-confidence. This is the kind of help in which Republicans believe, the kind they evidenced when, under the leadership of a Republican administration, the first breakthrough in 80 years was made in obtaining civil rights, civil legislation. Except for that success in 1957, and except for Republican leadership in the current Congress, it is scarcely likely that the Comprehensive Bill of 1964 could ever have become law. Now, my friends, I want to give you something very definitely from my heart. With the passage of this law, I believe that every Republican should now take upon himself a moral commitment, a commitment to do his utmost to see that this law is implemented not merely by the power of legally constituted enforcement agencies, but by the hearts of a determined and free people.
CBS News has just been told by Senator Hugh Scott that the Scranton forces will fight on the civil rights issue, not extremism, tonight.
That the spreading of the truth about our party and about the philosophy that has guided us from Lincoln's day to this moment is for us a basic mission and duty. And to do this, we must maximize our strength. We must learn that when any Republican concerns himself too much in condemning this or that faction of decent people in the party, he is hurting himself and the party. Strength is found in unity, under a consensus broad enough to accommodate the honest thinking of all who subscribe to our basic doctrines. Of course, individually and as a party, we must never shut our eyes to problems that adversely affect numbers of our people and that they are unable themselves to solve. These include certain phases of health, education, care of the aged, civil rights, slums, and impoverished areas. In attacking them, however, we refuse to clothe the federal government with exclusive power to handle such matters. Now, but here is the rub. To achieve a balance between local and federal participation in these problems is difficult. So difficult that it is in these efforts we find differences, sometimes deep differences, among us. But these differences, I submit, do not go to the root of republicanism and our basic doctrines. Rather, they concern matters of degree of effort, procedures, and methods. Other divisions, far less valid, are created among us by geography. Frankly, I doubt that I belong to any of these sectioned party groupings. I do hope that no one will read me out of the party because I was born in the Southwest, raised in the Midwest, now live in the East, spend the fall in the Deep South and winter in the Far West. Clearly, Clearly, we should set some definite limits on the extent to which each Republican should go in trying to prove himself a better, wiser, and sounder Republican than any of his fellows. Cannot we also agree wholeheartedly that radicalism of any kind, whether of the right or the left, is bad, not simply for our party, but also for America? I believe with all my heart that the kind of party ours must be is one that rejects as unfit and unwholesome all who are purveyors of hatred and intolerance, who are prone to the use of violence, who malign the character of fellow Americans, and who baselessly charge decent Americans with treasonable acts or intentions. We should reject equally those who misguidedly, through extremist economic nostrums and wishful thinking in foreign affairs, would weaken or deliberately destroy this republic. Now let me repeat one critical point. The divisions I mentioned within common sense Republicans do not evolve from differences over basic ideals and principles. They involve the lesser questions, and far too often, in the heat of our debates, we exaggerate their importance. Possibly we should take a good look at ourselves, because if such differences should ever become so deep and permanent that, even after our platform is agreed and our nominees are selected, we are unable to unite in goodwill for victory, then our quarreling groups could hardly coexist in the same party. I do not accept, nor for a single moment, not for a single moment, the need for any such ridiculous outcome. For a minority party, it would be tragic and, in addition, stupid. We can and we should compete vigorously and honorably among ourselves, but never can we afford to permit ourselves to be led astray by meaningless slogans, labels, preconceived notions, and prejudice. And we shall not be if we cleave to the straight path of principle and common sense. It is my conviction that the disappointed among us should strive to improve our party, not desert it. My friends, we are Republicans. If there is any finer word in the entire field of partisan politics, I have not yet heard it. So let us particularly scorn the divisive efforts of those outside our family, including sensation-seeking columnists and commentators, Because, my friends, I assure you that these are people who couldn't care less about the good of our party. Now, in saying this, I do not mean that we can turn our attention only inward. For 3 decades, we have been the minority party. Victory cannot be won by Republicans alone, no matter how tightly we are joined together. But a great chasm of public prejudice and lack of information separates from millions of independents and those Democrats who, being thoughtful, are also disenchanted. We simply must find better ways for bringing the truth to all these people. And here I have a word about an obligation that rests with special force upon the Republican Party. Since 1932, we have been protesting vigorously against the drift of political power to Washington, a drift that places far too much influence in the hands of federal government for controlling our lives and our entire economic structure. Now, since we Republicans believe in diversified power and political authority, let us remember that one effective way to counteract this trend is to insist upon better government in communities and in the several states. There are many ways of an organizational or legal character in which this improvement can come about. Here I refer to a single type of method, a moral and therefore an individual one. There are many problems which are peculiarly local in character, but are so serious and widespread as to occasion a national concern, thus increasing the demands that something be done. Among these are crimes in our city streets and public parks, juvenile delinquency, slaughter on our highways, attacks upon law enforcement officers, dropouts from our schools, and disorders arising out of the effort to integrate our institutions of learning. Good local governments will attack these problems by legal methods. They can impose punishment more in keeping with the crimes committed, especially in the case of repeaters. They can expand police protection, build more and better schools, and provide better lighting on our streets and parks, and use other methods. But beyond the cures that can be effected by local government lies the attitude of the average citizen, his degree of concern, his readiness to recognize and attack the problem himself, and to encourage the people that operate his government to perform their duty without fear. It is not enough to limit ourselves merely to writing letters to the editor or refusing to walk our streets after dark because they are dangerous. In the home, in the school, and the church is a great field where the aggregate influence of dedicated concern among the local citizenry can be applied with revolutionary impact on all these evils. We can demand that our judges dispense justice without fear or favor, ignoring special pleas from any of us, even where friends or family are involved. We can encourage and offer assistance to the policeman and his family when he is injured in the line of duty. And let us not be guilty of maudlin sympathy for the criminal who, roaming the streets with switchblade knife and illegal firearm, seeking a helpless prey, suddenly becomes, upon apprehension, a poor, underprivileged person who counts upon the compassion of our society. Who counts upon the compassion of our society and the laxness or weaknesses of too many courts to forgive his offense. Meeting in such conventions as this, we attempt to do our duty as we see it. And we donate to the campaigns of the nominees we have selected. I submit it is equally necessary that our substance and our political support help our governors, our mayors, and the organizations operating under them to keep the peace and to maintain order. In this entire field, I would profoundly hope that the Republican Party will assume its proper place in the forefront of the forces fighting for decency, safety, and progress in all the localities that make up this fair land. So, in sum, the questions before us come down to this. How intense is our determination to live and act Republican throughout our lives? Just how determined are we to elect Republicans to office in order to reapply fiscal soundness to federal affairs and strengthen local and state responsibilities and authority? How important is it, really, for us to restore an atmosphere in which the initiative of the individual and the vigor of competitive enterprise can again have the greatest possible influence throughout the land? If the answer be that these are truly among our fundamental goals, then let us renew our strength from the fountain of unity, not drown ourselves in a whirlpool of factional strife and divisive ambitions. And let us not stain our image by consorting with radicals of any kind. Now, my friends, before giving you the last few words that I have here written down, I want to tell you, I am forever and shall forever be sensible to the great honor that was twice bestowed upon me by a body such as this. It is the highest ambition that any American can have. And by your generosity and by your action, I was permitted, a poor farmer boy from Kansas, to enjoy it. So I... Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. This, then, in sketchy outline, is my treasured picture of the Republican Party. It is the kind of party in which I, for one, and I would hope the vast majority of Americans could serve with lasting pride. I count on it with confidence. My friends, for me, the shadows lengthen. But my loyalty to the historic mission of my party, to its great record and to its promise for the future is as strong and bright as ever. My confidence will never dim so long as all of us stand together for human dignity and for the sound and steady progress of this wonderful land. For so long as we stand as the strong, wise, and sturdy leader of freedom in the entire world. And now, may the Almighty look with favor on your purpose and on your work. And good night and Godspeed.
Campaign 64, CBS News coverage of the 1964 Republican Convention will continue in a moment.
Well, I think I'll take up golf.
Good thing you're a better life insurance agent than you are a fisherman.
I hope so.
I know so. Sure helped me retire comfortably. I didn't think I could.
I remember well. It was over 20 years ago, and you were doubtful.
Now explain that again. About how I can get paid regularly from my own life insurance when I retire.
Well, you have cash value life insurance here. I can set it up when you retire so that you and Mary will have a nice check every month. On top of your pension and Social Security.
Really? For how long?
For as long as either you or your wife lives.
You mean that?
It's guaranteed. And that's an advantage you can get only with life insurance.
You're right. Checks keep coming in regular as clockwork.
Yes, your life insurance offers this and other unique advantages. To find out more about them, see your life insurance agent. He's trained to help you.
We pause for a moment for a station edit.